Okay, we're going to go ahead and get started here. I would like to welcome everyone to this live Q&A with Frederick Somers. My name is Dave Casey. I am the Assistant Curator of Collections. I'm sorry, I don't know my title. Assistant Curator of Education and Exhibitions here at the Minnesota Marine Art Museum. And before we get started, I want to go over a couple housekeeping things with everyone so you know what to expect. This Zoom is set up as a webinar, meaning that Fred and I cannot see or hear you directly, but you can see and hear us talk. This means you do not have to worry about your mic camera being on or your microphone. We can't see or hear you either way. I have some prepared questions that I'm going to ask Fred, but I encourage you all to join the conversation and submit your own questions. You can do this by clicking the chat feature down at the bottom or the Q&A section. And just type in your questions there, and I can read them off to Fred as we go. If you submit a question, I'll read it. So please take the time to type something in there. You can expect this Q&A to go no longer than an hour. Our conversation is being recorded and will be made available on our website after probably tomorrow afternoon if you want to share that with anyone. A couple people to thank. This program and all of our adult education programs are free thanks to the generous support of Ernest and Sally Micek in memory of W.B. Bill Gautch. The exhibition, Frederick D. Somers, Miracle of Waters, is made possible by the voters of Minnesota through a Minnesota State Arts Board operating support grant thanks to a legislative appropriation from the Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund. Now I'd like to thank Wisconsin Public Radio for being the media sponsor for this exhibition. For those of you unfamiliar with the Minnesota Marine Art Museum, we are a fine art museum located in Winona, Minnesota, whose mission is to engage visitors in meaningful visual art experiences through education and exhibitions that explore the ongoing and historic relationship with water. We offer 6 galleries on site. 3 galleries house our permanent collection of historic American and European artwork, while 3 galleries feature temporary exhibitions of contemporary art, exhibitions on loan for other institutions, or works not on permanent display from our own collections. We offer a wide range of inspiring education programs, all of which are currently done either in virtual or take-home formats due to the pandemic. You can find more information on exhibitions and programs, as well as our museum and store hours on our website, which is mmam.org. I would especially like to thank Frederick Somers for being here with us to chat today. Frederick Somers has been painting full-time since 1975 at his farm home studio near Northfield, Minnesota. His oil and pastel paintings are known for their peaceful sensitivity and reflect themes from the land. Whether in intimate views of grass, rocks, and water with reflections of light and sky, or in spacious vistas of its countryside, he seeks to share the hidden places of nature. He now brings his love to life to sensitive commissioned portraits. Fred's pastel paintings of Big Woods State Park near Northfield were chosen for the 1996 Minnesota State Park permit design. He also continues to inspire others through his painting workshops in the US and abroad. Since his designation as American Swedish Artist of the Year in 1984, he has continued to exhibit and teach in Scandinavia. Somers has exhibited work throughout the United States. Most recently, he had with a 50th anniversary retrospective exhibition at the American Swedish Institute in Minneapolis, and as part of the Pastel Societies of America's group exhibitions during Brilliance. Currently on exhibition now at the Minnesota Marine Art Museum is Frederick D. Somers, Miracle of Waters. This exhibition features over 50 pastel and oil paintings depicting intimate views of regional lakes, rivers, and streams. If you have not had the opportunity to see this exhibition in person, we only have a week left. The last day for Miracle of Waters is this coming Sunday, April 11th. If you cannot make it to the museum, we also have available an online exhibition on our website that features all of the images and texts from the exhibition. If you're interested in checking out some of Fred's work during this talk, you can pull up that website and follow along some of the images on there. With that, I would like to welcome Frederick Somers.
Thank you, David, very, very much. I'm just honored to be here tonight.
Good. We're glad you can make it. It's toward the run of your exhibition here, but I know a lot of people have been able to make it in and have questions and would love to hear you talk. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and jump into some questions if that works for you, Fred.
That'd be good. Go ahead, David.
Okay. And like I said, if anyone has any questions, feel free to type them into the chat and I will read them off for Fred as we go. So just to start off, let's talk fairly broadly about the trajectory of your career. You've been working as an artist full-time since 1975. It's quite a long career for an artist. Where did it begin and how did you end up here?
You know, that 75 date is a designation of leaving college teaching and then for 5 years and then 10 years of training at the University of Omaha and the University of Iowa, getting my arts degrees there. So there were 15 years prior to that. Coming to Northfield, I taught in both the colleges and taught printmaking, drawing, and painting. So
how did you make that switch from teaching to painting full time?
Well, you know, one of the things that happened was in the 70s, the economy changed, and there were no jobs in teaching art then that were available, and I moved to this farm house in 1975 and began renting and picking eggs to bring income in, and then painting in my studio. But one of the things that was transformative that I just mentioned in passing here, but it's really important, is that my training and my direction was to be a radical, political, social, in-your-face artist. And my paintings were about disemboweled bodies and dead people and a lot of things like this. And in this window of time, I had an experience with my Heavenly Father that changed my whole direction of my career. And I began painting what I loved instead of what I was focused on, with the anger and deep struggles that were in my heart. So this changing and wandering in the woods near my home and the fields and streams was one of the greatest things that happened to me as a man. And then as my career, I would have never ever dreamed that I would be doing what I'm doing now. But I'll tell you, the difference is transformative and night and day. I'm so glad to be painting what I love. And that's one reason. So it wasn't easy. It just, I was thrown out of a teaching job doing this, and then started wandering around the land and looking at the landscape here. And I just fell in love with absolute joy. Plein air painting didn't exist then in my world. Right now, it's one of the most talked about, but I started carrying my paints and my supplies out in the woods. And I carried watercolors and pencils and drew a lot, and that didn't work. And then I had this pastel set, and I started doing pastel paintings, and that was another transformative change. But I have been doing oils and pastels my entire career.
It's interesting. I didn't know that. I'm not familiar with some of your very early work. You know, being someone that's you know, politically conscious and, you know, as you said, you know, radical ideas at the time. You know, your work now, I would see is very calm. So I can imagine it's a big change from your early work then. You talked about your inspiration coming from nature. What draws you to the themes of nature?
Well, you know, I began walking around the streams here, and I was telling someone the other day, I find being outdoors does something to me that physically and emotionally makes me feel better. I can have a tough time and be exhausted and tired and go for an hour walk by these streams I paint and come back refreshed. And there was something about it that I just was compelled. And to be honest with you, David, in the beginning, I fought painting the landscape. I literally thought landscape painting and beauty was not something that a real artist should think about. And I was overwhelmed by it. And I just started to paint this beautiful land, and especially the water. And I was drawn into it with just, it was wonderfully healing and overwhelming. And the struggle in the beginning was just because I was dealing with imagery of disemboweled bodies, dead people, skeletons, dead birds, all these things, and then dealing with beauty all of a sudden. And I thought it was something that was weak, but I do not feel that way. I feel there's a mystery in beauty that is profound. And I think that's all I can say about it. It's
sure. Talking more specifically about your landscape paintings and your pictures from nature, are all of your landscapes depictions of real places, or some of them imagined?
No, many of them are imagined. The imagined ones are more difficult, but it's some at the heart. You know, one of the things that I learned, I was told what art was, and I was very good at it, and I had a reputation. But when I started painting what I loved, there was a new thing, and I didn't have teachers to tell me what to do. But I started thinking, how do we see? And when we see, we focus on something that's of interest, and then the rest is out of focus. But we interpret that out of focus area. Then we do something else. We bring in experience, we bring in memory, and we bring in hope about the future. When a farmer plants in a field, he sees a harvest. He doesn't see the plowed field. So this kind of thing with emotions, past, present, and future, started to come into my landscape as a part of something that would, so the ones that are more abstract, the ones that are more, they don't exist except there and that. Many of the pieces that you have, that the Jones family donated to the Marine Museum, those are all of this type of dreaming dreams and taking what you see in front of you, but then making it into something that's beyond what's there in front of you.
Sure, I'm going to pull up real quick and share the screen of some of the paintings that you're just referring to, the ones that were donated to the museum that are in the exhibition, just so folks see what we're talking about. We're talking about these three here, right, Fred?
Yeah, Beyond Blue is the one, yeah.
And this one here, this one's called
that is
Drawn
the
to
one
the Light.
Beyond Blue. You know, one of the transformative things is because water became, I grew up in Nebraska, and water is muddy and dirty much of the time. There's very rare, except when you draw something out of a deep aquifer and well. The normal streams running are always muddy. But coming to Minnesota, I started, because of the limestone base and the deep water coming from the deep part of the earth, the clear water and the stream allowed the blue sky to reflect on there. And that was one of the transformative things that happened, is the color blue in the landscape is so unique. And it's because of the absorption of light in our sky. The expression of the sky blue color is because all the other light waves have been absorbed, and we see that blue. So you see the blue on this beautiful water that flows through these valleys that I paint. And that became a driving force to where is the blue today, because blue isn't there every day. Right now, there is no blue in the water today because the clouds are all over. So on a day, there might be one open place where there's a blue in the sky. So I would start interpreting and experiencing the landscape by positioning myself in places that an artist wouldn't normally be, because I wanted to see the bounce of the blue off of the water. So created new ideas for composition that I never had before because I looked at the blue. The first year of our marriage, the astronauts were in outer space and they took a picture and talked about our blue planet. That was a transformative time for the world. We had never seen the world look like that. So blue for me, blue also is in the spectrum for artists in the darks. Red is in the middle value, yellow in the light, and the blues in the dark. So you can only see color if light is there. So it's from the darkest range of colors, it's the color of hope for me. I really, really love blue.
That's a great story. And I'm glad to hear that, because this is a piece that's in the museum's collection. I've always found it a very refreshing piece when you walk by it, and now hearing you talk about the blue water of this region, that really rings true for me. And talking about that blue planet taken from the moon, that photograph we're all probably familiar with of Earth from the moon. Let's see. I had a question pop up here. So the pizza that we were just looking at, there's gold leaf in those paintings, right?
Yeah. Yes.
So this person asked, Pam asks, what made you add that sort of sacred geometry into the gold pieces? I like them because they take it further and make you look deeper. So we're referring to the gold leaf. How can you explain that process and why you use that?
Okay, I'll work on a number of steps on that. One was I was titling my paintings gold, and I call it gold, gold, gold. And then I thought, why not use gold? And then my art dealer for 35 years, Vicky Dorsey Hubby, Vicky was one of the people connected with the St. John's Bible. So I got to see some of the St. John's Bible before it was cut, the pages of artwork, and gold was used in there. And it was so overwhelming and so wonderful. And so I sought out some artists to help me learn how to use gold leaf. And that became a beginning. One of the big learning curves that I had is gold is middle value. It's the same value as cadmium orange, but it's because when light touches it, in the Bible, St. John's Bible, they call it illuminated illuminated manuscripts. But when light touches it, it's brighter than white. So it was adding some new, another level of value, meaning light and dark value. It was adding 1 or 2 points brighter as a potential in my paintings. And in the first place, I stuck all the gold in the light values, but it's middle value. So I dulled all my middle value or all the light parts of my painting by putting gold that was dark middle value. And that was a part of the learning curve. The other thing was light. Gold only touches gold. The light only touches the gold when it's flat. You have to have a perfect ricochet of light bouncing off and you don't see it. But some of the gold I raised portions up, and physically I put pumice and glue to raise it up so that there's always a touch of light on that raised portion. Now, one of the other things about the water, oh, David, I was going to answer about the hexagons.
Oh, I can pull that one up, yeah.
The hexagons are about the molecular structure of water, and the making of snowflakes comes and stems from the molecular shape of 6 sides. And so that's part of what the why of the hexagons.
Here we go. This painting?
Yes.
This is Emerging, 2016.
Yes. Yeah. And the other thing is the circles and some of the other things are my trying to experiment. A friend of mine who's a musician told me that musicians have time is their main power of the expression through music, but their job and the hope is to create space. And for the artist, space is their best expression, and they to create time. So I have a thing about Eastern and Western time, that time, I think, is linear Western thinking and circular Eastern. And I kind of wonder if it's more like the DNA and the Milky Way is a Fibonacci kind of a curve that. So I don't know. None of us, I don't think, really know if it's being kind of just artistic or whatever. But it's something that I'm thinking about.
Sure. Since you're talking about some of your processes with the gold leaf, I'd like to talk a little bit about the medium that you choose. The paintings in the exhibition are most of them are pastels, some of them are oils. Can you talk a little bit about, and we have Betsy Bethune is hopping on here asking some questions about some of your materials, your surface, and what type of pastels you use. So can you explain the difference between an oil painting and a pastel painting for those that might be unfamiliar with it?
Yes. All paint, art paint is a pigment and a binder. And watercolors have gum arabic and water and pigment. Oils have linseed oil and pigment. And pastels have gum tragacanth or gum arabic and water. And they each are holding pigment to express it. So most time pastels are dry and in a stick form, but that piece with the hexagons called emerging has a lot of wet pigment pouring in that. And part of what I saw is artists have made their own paints for many, many centuries. It's just recently that we have the blessing of having products like they are. I don't think there's ever been a more great time for artists and materials than there is right now. So the idea that I found so intriguing with pastels is the uniqueness of the application of the dry pastel creates something called broken color, and small particles of the pigment lay on the surface. I like handmade paper and paper products. Other artists are using a sanded products, and the sanded products grab the pastel and do things with the pastel that paper doesn't. But I have a lifetime of printmaking and using paper. The other thing is some of my tools are 75, 80-year-old metal tools that I put gold leaf on. And those tools are so valuable. If I used the sanded paper, I would destroy the edge of these tools I'm using. And so I really love the paper. But one of the things that I've been doing is taking the pastel pigment and wetting it, and then wetting it down with more water and with more gum tragacanth. And that allows some of these poured pigment things, and it also allows for the gold leaf to adhere to places that wouldn't. Gold is attracted to oil. So when I work with oils, I have to take and put a marble dust on the oil painting so that there's no sticky parts of there. Otherwise, the gold will stick to any part on there and I don't have any control over it. So each one of them has a uniqueness. When you use wet oil paints, there's really no way to do something like the pastel because the dry nature of the pastel sticks. You can achieve some things that are very unique. And it's why I've been enjoying the two parts for me. And especially with my painting of water, I thought, why not wet the pastel and pour it and start learning about some control? I don't like abstract art for myself, but I see abstract beauty everywhere in the landscape. And so that's what I'm trying to achieve more and more of the beauty that I see and of movement in water. It's never static. It's always so, so dynamic, I think is a good word.
Sure. And I have a picture here. I'm going to share the screen real quick. This is the picture you gave us that's in the exhibition of your pastels, your box of pastels here.
Did that answer Betsy's question?
Yeah, she's asking about materials.
My pastel box, David, is set up like a landscape with the sky as the lightest, and the sloping trees are the next, and then the landscape flat, and then the shadowed areas. So I set my pastel set up with the darks at the bottom, and then 6 color, color choices there, with the yellows and reds and orange and purples.
It's interesting that you say that, because the gradient of the hues and the shade on there is so profound that it almost looks like the photo is poorly lit because it's so dark on the bottom and light on the top. But that's just the gradient that you created in organizing your pastels here. That's really interesting to see. Betsy had a couple more parts of her questions. Let's see. So what tip would you tell pastel artists always to do to have a successful painting? Or what do you think makes a successful painting?
I'm gonna go back to my paper again. One of the things that happened with my paper is I used a Viva towel, and I would wipe the pastel stick. And then one day I looked at the Viva towel and I thought, why not take the pigment that I just wiped off and use that? So one of the secrets for mine is putting on a very thin layer of pigment in the beginning to
as an underpainting?
As an underpainting, yes. And then build up the surface with more pressure. So that's probably the lightest pressure that you could even achieve. And then heavier touching starts to fill the paper up. And so I think values. One of the things that happened to me in a workshop, I was so good at drawing and of doing things. I could draw and do things so well in that way, but I had a weakness in value, in lights and darks. And I was taking a workshop with Albert Handel, and Albert looked at me and he saw that weakness. There's a Swedish artist named John Carlson, and he would have his art students do 4 10-minute paintings as a work exercise as they started to paint their plein air painting. And they would paint in front of them, to the left side, the back of them, and to the right. They would spin around. And in doing that, this is what Albert told me to do. Only do backlit paintings, which meant I had to face all the darks and have the light behind everything rather than each side and everything. And he looked at me and he knew I really had something emotionally happen to me. And I said, there was an uncomfortableness that I hadn't faced before. And at the end of the week, I started to see what was happening. And he is the one that broke me free from my seeing the way I did and going in so that I would go into these dark areas. And like that painting Emerging, that Prussian blue is the darkest blue in the palette, but it's the richest dark. And it caused a freedom for me that I never had. And after that workshop with Albert, I read this John Carlson book on the landscape. He's a Swedish artist that is very famous in the plein air world. And when I read that and saw that, I said, that's what Albert was teaching me. And if I'd been in the class with John Carlson, he would have helped me with that right away. So that was a breakthrough for me. I'm really grateful for Albert that
Sure.
he taught that and saw that weakness in me.
Well, that leads to another question I have is, someone asked, was there a teacher or a mentor who inspired you along the way? And how has that impacted your work? Is there any other mentors that you can think of along your way?
One of the great joys that one of the state arts grants, my wife Avis would help me apply for state arts grants, and the last year that we applied, I got 2 of them, and the grant was to leverage both the show at the Swedish Institute and the show at the Nerstrand Big Woods to get museum glass so that I could leverage and be with you, David. And that was a part of the dream. So one of the other ones was to study Japanese and Eastern and Western pastels. And so the grant allowed me to go to Colorado to be with Terry Ludwig. And Terry Ludwig is an artist and a manufacturer of Ludwig pastels. And then I flew to New Jersey and I studied with a Japanese artist, Mako Fujimura. And Mako was doing pigment pours from a place if I have one of my bucket list is to go to that store that he buys his pigments. It's called Nihonga, which just means Japanese painting. But that store has thousands and thousands of colored pigments and minerals and the things to make paint with. And he would use that, and it's in different grains of weight. So because when you're pouring pigment, the heavier weight responds different than the light weight. When something is mixed really finely, it disperses differently, and the heavy one sinks and does stuff with textures. So that piece emerging has that very evident in there. The heavier pigment separates and lays down, where when you're painting with a brush or your pastel stick, you don't see that as an option. But that was something that I learned from Mako. And I got to spend 10 and a half hours with him in his studio and talking and sharing. Yeah.
I've got another question for you. You talked quite a bit about pastels now. You also talked about your influence on nature and that the importance of being out in nature for you. You mentioned in some of the writing here in the exhibition that you use ground up fossils and rocks that you've found in your pastels.
Yes.
Can you explain that process and why you chose to make this part of your artwork?
I wish that I had brought the pastel in. I have it sitting on a counter, and you'll get to see it when you deliver the show. But I'm holding up something right here. This is a cephalopod fossil that was given to me by my neighbors, Doug and Mary Jones. This is the smallest one I own. This is another one right here, and I want you to see the segmented growth rings. This is a creature that's like an octopus that might be 12, 16 foot long. It was carnivorous, had long arms on it. But I was painting there one day, getting the exhibit together, and some of the pieces that you have in the show. One of them called, let's see, from the beginning. Let's see. Let me get the title here. The emerging of the ancients. Let's see. Anyway, that piece had a fossil that I had, a cephalopod.
Is it blooming with the ancients?
Here's the picture. I went and said, why not take some of the material that the fossils and the limestone are made out of and grind them up? So I pounded them with a 2-pound hammer, and then I started grinding them smaller and smaller. And then I added gum tragacanth and water and some other things, just some simple things to them. And I made my own pastel sticks. So many of the pieces in the show have the rock that the stream ran through. They have it in the painting. Wow. Actual. Yeah.
That's great. So those cephalopod fossils were found, right outside Northfield.
Yeah,
there where you live?
These are from the little stream that my neighbor, I've been painting there 3 years at that. And there's a bunch of other tributaries. They're all of the Prairie Creek watershed that runs through the Nerstrand Woods and Karen Park and right in Rice County, Minnesota.
Sure, I think this is the painting you're referring to. This blooming
that's
with the
correct.
Ancients. Yeah. Okay.
Yes.
So this painting has those fossils ground right into that pigment. So
yes,
when you working with those pastels that you made using that those fossils in stone, does it react any different while you're painting?
Well, let's just say I prefer my Terry Ludwig and other pastels. I'm not as skilled at making my own, but they did work. And I called another one of my other manufacturers and asked them for some help, and they gave me some other thoughts and ideas. You have to add some things to some of the pastels. Stay hard, and you add something to soften them to allow the pigment to adhere on the paper. But this was a play of, we live in such a unique place. This place we live in, Minnesota, is profound. The limestone is evident all around Winona with the high bluffs, and it's been carved by a glacier waters running down through there. And all of this area up here, some of the spots are called the driftless region, but we have these glacial boulders that are brought from all over north down here, and this is the spot where the meltwaters drop them down. And then there's a tectonic fault from Gautch and Lake Superior down into Kansas, and there's another stone that only exists here when volcanic molten rock goes through ocean water. That's called schist and greenstone. So this place has violent fire and water, beautiful water flood, and then frozen ice and snow here that make this beautiful place we call Minnesota.
Yeah, I'm always the geology of this area is fascinating, and it affects so much of why we're here today and how we interact with our environment today. So it's interesting to see you use those materials directly into your painting. I've got another question here from someone that typed in. I just want to encourage anyone else that hasn't asked the question, go ahead and type that into the chat or the question and answer section. I'll go ahead and read that to Fred. I do have one from Emily here that she says, "It's so interesting to hear you talk about the science of making art. Are there any ways of painting and creating that you want to try but haven't yet?"
I think scale is one of the things, and I was getting ready to enlarge scale. Scale is something that I think all artists think about, and a lot of the plein air world, most are doing some smaller pieces, but you have to start thinking, when you think about space, to think about scale. One of the things that Mako Fujimura talked about is Mark Rothko was an abstract expressionist artist from Poland, and his paintings had a human scale where his arm width wide and height, so a 4 or 5 foot by 6 or 7 foot tall that would touch the floor, and he could humanly work with that. So there was a scale there that was human. and he would be engulfed in that painting because of his human size and the size of the painting. So that's something that I would like to consider in as a future idea.
Sure.
I have some large gator board and some things. It's all it takes more material, more skill, and I've looked at some paper for doing those larger pieces.
Sure. Yeah, the pieces in the exhibition are they're not terribly large scale. So there's a couple of that are bigger, but most of them are, we're talking probably like 36 inches across or so, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, the one piece that's to your right on
Yep.
that wall, that was an earlier piece, but one of the things with pastels, the surfaces are getting better and better for the acrylic museum glass that you can get now is lighter weight and has higher quality, but you have a heaviness with a glass covered painting, but for me the pastel is just nothing like it.
And this is the
it can
piece.
achieve.
Sure.
That's the
And
piece, John.
this is the piece
Yeah.
for, as we were trying to, you said it's a little from 1985. It's called Slew in the Grass Series 2. And that's probably over 4 feet across. So it's a decent sized painting. This is one that the digital image doesn't quite do it justice. So I encourage you to come and check this one out in person. So I have a question. Sorry, let me close this pop back. Looking at your landscapes, they're often very intimate close-up views. They're not sweeping vistas or mountaintop views. We're looking at, in this exhibition, mostly water, very up close. We're looking at the edge of a waterfall, the edge of a stream, or zoomed in on the reflection, or some of those that aren't necessarily water focused are like those birds' nests. We're looking very close, zoomed in. So you have a lot of intimate views of your landscapes. Is there a reason why you choose those very intimate views over a larger landscape?
I tell a story about the breakthrough on a day of seeing. I was alone in the woods, fresh snow, and off trail on private property. Everything was just perfect for me. And I came on a limestone outcropping that was quite large. It might have been like a 16, 20, 30 foot wide and say 5 or 6 foot high. As I came close, there was ice crystals in the holes on the limestone. And at that time, I instinctively did not look at that, except I leaped for joy and I talked out loud with that. It was so amazing. And I backed up 20 feet to take a picture of context. And the minute I did that, I said that abstract hoarfrost is what drew me in this landscape. The landscape around it is the reason for it. How close do I come to that intimate experience of that excitement of that? That's where the beginning of the mystery of abstraction in the landscape is a really what my friend John Mockestead called it, a wonderment. There's a profound beauty that I think that the Psalm 19 says there's a voice in the landscape and heavens that declare God's glory. And I think I hear and see that all over for me. The gold leaf and these humble attempts to express that. And the idea of scale, there's a poet that I like. He's not living any longer, but he talked about the landscape of the prairie and the landscape of the woods. And he said the prairie is right there, open and honest in front of you. You can see for miles away what's going to come and what you're going to experience, but the woods hides things all the time. And I walk from a restored prairie into the woods over and over and over. And if there's something of a concept and an idea, David, that I would really like to pursue, but it seems like it's so far out that I'm not sure how I would achieve it. It's capturing this intimacy and this profound abstract of the space of the landscape on the prairie, and then the intimacy of these pools of water and the streams and the little spots. So that's an extreme of direction that I haven't but just touched on in some of my pieces, like the piece behind you that's behind you on the wall. That
Sure.
That piece is mostly reflected water, and very little land in there, and that kind of comes into the idea of what I'm speaking of. But it's the one on the story wall.
Yep. There we go.
Yeah.
Yeah, the reflection in the water there.
That one, correct.
Yeah.
That is mostly
Song
water.
of Light.
And everything on there, most of it is just reflected water. So that kind of a thing where how do I get the intimacy of the interior of the land and then show when I walk out of the woods and onto this prairie and the sky is 180 to more degrees of the blue and the clouds and stuff, and I've been in that intimate space inside the woods. I think that would be a challenge for me that I would like to try to experience.
Sure. So you talked about a lot of the time you've spent outdoors, and you mentioned painting in plein air, which is painting out of doors. Do you do most of your painting in plein air?
No, I used to do more when I was younger. But one of the things that I realized was plein air painting drove me to accomplish and make a painting. And when I'm out alone, I can think about things and I can take off and dream things when I'm alone and don't paint. I can see developing of ideas and concepts that I can't. And I see more around me of that time. Now, you have to paint paintings if you're going to be an artist and a painter. But I realized that coming home with a painting, a plein air painting, or coming home with a big idea that was something to develop later. So I often am following through the woods and I'm thinking about design ideas and looking for those new directions and possibilities.
Yeah, if you're painting outdoors, you're limited by time and light too, so you don't have the time
But I
to
have
develop
to
those
have
things.
both. I really treasure both of them.
Sure. I have a question here from Edie. Asks, I love the way you do water, especially in the waterfall. What technique do you use for water movement? She's asking about how you depict water movement in your work.
Well, water painting it is 3 or 4 levels. There's what's underneath and what is right there in front of you and what is reflected. And then there's the physical things that are on the water. So those, I feel that my style has been informed by that pursuit of going over and over and over to try to achieve that, as well as when I tell you I was pouring wet pigment, that was to try to have people see what is moving and dynamic, and I'm making an image that's static and still. But that over and over, part of the thing, some of the water on there, I'm taking a Viva towel and just wiping. Sometimes I just touch the Viva towel on the pastel paper, and it just puts this little cloud of dust. And I put another one on there, and I can get things that for me are closer achieving what I see. So part of my style is affected by my desire to paint what I see and feel. And it isn't photographic. I'm not looking at photographic because many of these pieces have portions of something, and then I'm eliminating big areas and then looking at an overall design. A complement is something that you focus on and the space around it, or the to make it look really beautiful. And so that's part of making a good painting is putting what you need to make what you want people to look at be really beautiful, and eliminating things is really a crucial part. And maybe sometimes what you take away is more important in the final painting than painting everything that you see in front of you.
Sure. So you've talked quite a bit about your process and how you get inspiration for your works. How long does it typically take you to complete one of your works?
Do you know, I would love to do one painting a week. That would be a fantastic, often that 50 to down to even half of that, one every 2 weeks. And especially the ones that are the water pieces that don't exist anywhere except right there. The pieces in the painting of your museum, that's the only place they exist. They're not a photograph somewhere that's been copied, and they take longer. They take longer than the others. And I think the other thing Avis would tell me is, tell David, it takes 60 years or 50 years.
Sure.
Because I'm seeing things right now from my heart, and things that I would never even have dreamed of I'm seeing, and I can do things today that I couldn't do.
Sure. The process starts long before you pull out your art materials.
But if you talk about how many done, that 25 to 50 a year is
sure.
a numerical number.
I'm curious about this past year. We've all had have been affected by the pandemic and things going on politically in the world. How has the last year affected your creativity as an artist, or has it in any way? How has the last year affected you in your work?
When I first moved to this farmhouse, my idea, especially as a radical avant-garde background, I thought the epitome and the ultimate was to have a studio in a loft in a city. And I put myself down over and over and over and over again. I called myself, I'm just a country mouse artist. I'm not one of the artists that live in the city. But I want to tell you, David, being where I am and doing what I am doing right now, I would never, ever, ever trade where I am right now. And because I've lived here, the neighbors all know me. And I literally have people that will pull in my yard and tell me I shouldn't have been on the ladder. And it's all in love. And they even say, I'll call the sheriff on you if I see you doing that. And I have neighbors that say, Friday night, Fred, because your Avis isn't with you anymore, I want you to come and have dinner at our home. So I have these kind of beautiful neighbors all around this area. One of the places I paint regularly, I park in a farmyard, and my friend says, if you aren't back at your truck, my dogs and my four-wheeler are coming out after you. So I have these kind of people. So I think losing my wife, Avis, prepared me for COVID in a way that I wouldn't have thought of, because I was being alone with the neighbors' help. But I've had a lot of freedom. I'm out in the woods and I'm doing things. So I feel that I've had a really good season in this. And I've had the blessing of my children living with me since Thanksgiving, and the joy of having family in the house right now has been an extra special. So I haven't been alone that way. It's been wonderful to have loved ones close.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. I have one more question here from one of our attendees that just popped up. I want to get in before we get going here in a minute. Speaking of neighbors there around Northfield, Tom is asking, I remember artists in Northfield more than 50 years ago when I was a student. Did Arnold Flatten or Ed Sovick influence you? Do you know those names?
Oh, I want to tell you. Ed Sovick tried to help me with my career because he knew how hard it was to be an artist full time. And Ed came to me and started teaching me about doing architectural renderings and about doing some murals for some retirement centers and stuff. And it just never worked out. It was so hard. And he came to me, Ed came to me at one opening, and he comes up close and he goes, Fred, the best thing that ever happened to you is that I did get you to do architectural rendering. He said, I'm so happy you did. And Ed brought, he was in some group called Lutheran, no. He had a Christians in the Arts event that happened at St. Olaf that he was one of the sponsors, and he brought Ben Shahn, the Jewish artist. And I got to spend time with Ben Shahn, and I was studying with Mauricio Lazansky, and I was sitting in Mauricio and Ben Shahn were friends. And so he says, please talk to Mauricio when you see him. So the contact with Ed Sovick, and that is just absolutely wonderful. Arnie Flatten. Arnie took me under his wing, and my first plein air paintings were in his yard, behind his house, on the creek that ran behind his house. And he did not believe in having art shows. And one of my jobs teaching at St. Olaf was to be the director of the exhibits. And I personally installed and hung the only 2 art shows that Ed Sovick ever had. And he gave me a gift financially that I bought a down jacket for winter for my wife and I from the money that I made. But he said, Fred, you did the most fantastic job for my shows. So I knew both of them. And after Arnie died, I would go to his home of his wife, and she was quite blind. So I would knock on the door and talk loud to her, and she would let me in. So I would park at her place and go plein air paint down in the valley behind their house. So both of those people, they're just treasured memories. I'm so glad whoever shared that you brought it up.
Yeah, thank you, Tom, for bringing that up. Well, that we're at an hour. Fred, so we want to respect everyone's time here and let them go. Do you have anything coming up that you would like to mention? The exhibition closes here on Sunday as the last day. Do you have anything coming up beyond that you want to mention?
Well, I'm personally getting new work ready for a delivery to the Edgewood Orchard Gallery in Wisconsin, and that piece behind you is from Anderson's Pond, yes, in Wisconsin. So that was a treasured time, and we found out about Edgewood and Door County because of Olaf Christensen, the other choir director at St. Olaf, and he and his wife and my wife Avis and I, they would let us go stay at their summer home in Door County. His parents homesteaded and pioneered in Door County. But that was another treasured connection with St. Olaf. So I'm going to do that. And then I'm judging the International Pastel Show in Chicago. But I really look forward to gardening and new work. I feel I'm having a breakthrough right now with new work and feeling good about life. So
I'm glad
Yeah.
to hear that. Well, thank you, Fred.
And I want to thank you, David. David, thanks for you and all the staff there. It's been an honor to be with you. I hope there's another show in the future that I
Sure.
can have some exciting new work.
Right, great. And thank you all for attending. Like I said, this is recorded, so we'll end up on our website. Thank you for all for being here, and we will keep an eye out on the museum's website, social media, and our newsletter for any other upcoming events that we might have. So Fred, thanks again, and we will be in touch soon about out of the exhibition and getting the artwork back to you.
Thank you.
Okay.
Good night, David.
Good night, everybody. Thank you.